Good afternoon, my name's Guy Denton and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you all today about how my hospital is developing its use of data. So firstly, my apologies for not being present in Las Vegas. Trust me, I would much rather be in the Venetian in Las Vegas than in a fairly small meeting room in King's Cross. No offence to the guys here present. But the reason for this is that my wife is in her third trimester of pregnancy and I've got a 2-year-old girl, so I considered flying over to Las Vegas to present on this might be a marriage limiting decision, so decided to present from home. So please bear with me. So the slide shows my name's Guy Denton. I'm Deputy Finance Director for a hospital in London. So, and within my role it covers all aspects of financial performance. It covers everything around decision support and planning as well. So I'm responsible for all of those areas. My background is, I've always been a geek, so I've always been into numbers. My degree was in mathematics and computer science, and then following that I joined a national graduate scheme in 2004 where I joined the NHS, which is the largest employer in Europe, the National Health Service, and joined their finance graduate scheme. And I met my wife on the year after the first year I was there, and then I've been within the NHS for 11 years since then. I have been encouraged to give a bit of information about myself and so you know a bit more about me. I'm a big sports fan, so I'm into all things sports-wise. I do quite a lot of running, so I've run the London Marathon a couple of times and I'm hoping to do an Ironman one day if time permits, given having 2 children and I actually can stay awake long enough to do the training. Please feel free to tweet me at any time. All my contact details are on there and there's my tweet handle at the bottom, so I would absolutely love to hear from you if you find this useful, if you find it interesting, if you find it pretty pointless. All feedback is good feedback, so I'd very much appreciate you sending anything back to me. And in case it isn't blindingly obvious, I'm not going to be able to receive any questions during the presentation unless you can shout extremely loudly. So please feel free to save questions to the end and direct them at John, who'll be able to answer them much more eloquently than I. And again, if you have anything you'd like to know specifically about my hospital or about the work that we're doing, please feel free to send me an email or tweet me and I will get back to you, as I'd love to hear from you. Today, I'm going to be talking about how myself and my colleagues are trying to move from having a system in our hospital where we have lots of disparate sources of information on finance, on workforce, on clinical information, all reported in various different ways through various means, to having one integrated solution which is accessible throughout the trust, that is available on web browser, that can be accessed via iPad, via iPhone, and most importantly of all, has one consistent single source of the truth. So for the first time, workforce data saying the same thing as the finance ledger and saying the same thing as rostering data, all being entirely consistent. So I'm talking a bit about that. We're very far from being completed on that journey. There's an awful long way to go, so I'm going to be talking a bit about where we've started, the work that we've done so far, and what the next year or so will involve and where we're hoping to go with it. A bit about my hospital. As will become fairly painfully apparent, I'm extremely proud to work at the hospital that I work at. It's one of the largest hospitals in the United Kingdom, and it delivers truly world-class care to the patients, both locally and nationally within the country. We've come top or very near top in metrics around patient quality and patient safety, and that's happened over the last few years, so we're consistently there or thereabouts at being in the top in the country, which I'm very, very proud to say and very proud to be a part of. So we've got very ambitious plans for the next few years, including the government has very recently approved proton beam therapy to be developed within the trust. So we're now going to be digging a hole 2 floors beneath where the hospital is at the moment and building a cancer hospital on top of that and developing proton beam therapy. So we're very ambitious, got an awful lot of challenge ahead, but it's good news for the local population in London and nationally. I've been reliably informed that one of the keys to presenting is to get the audience to like you. And so it's with some trepidation I put this slide up, aware of the audience that's watching this. But this is a report that's been developed by the Commonwealth Fund about national healthcare systems and where different countries' healthcare systems sit relative to each other. and that comes out showing that across a number of categories that UK is actually top healthcare system in the world. So you may be familiar with the work of the Commonwealth Fund. They're a Washington-based organisation. They've benchmarked healthcare systems within Europe, so France, Germany, UK, along with the Antipodean countries, along with the United States, to check them across a whole range of metrics for quality of care, access of care, and measured as objectively as they can against each other. So the reason that I'm saying this is not just because I'm 5,200 miles away, so I can say this kind of thing, but it's because I'm keen to emphasise that I think the trust I work in is an extremely good trust that works in an extremely good system. So I'm proud to work there, but while we're delivering this fantastic quality of care, and while patients rate us extremely highly, actually our use of information, our use of financial information in particular to support decision making is very far from being world class. We know this, we've had issues with this for years, and it's something that I was very keen to address when I came to this trust 18 months ago. Part of what makes my hospital extremely ambitious and able to deliver the high quality patient care is its ability to deliver is its ability to work with University College London. We're extremely proud to be an academic health science centre and to be affiliated with University College London. There's the 14-15 QS World University Rankings has UCL coming out as joint 5th in the world. I thought this slide might go down slightly better given the audience, as MIT is nudging all the Brits into second place at best. So MIT coming out number 1, but I say UCL, we're very proud about the research capability that we have, and it attracts extremely top quality professionals who are keen to carry on their research side of the work alongside with them. Moving on to a bit more detail, before you think I'm going to talk to you for 20 to 30 minutes purely about how great my hospital is, I'll move on to actually the data and what we're doing. So for the technically minded amongst you, which I would imagine is the vast majority of the audience, we're currently operating using the 11G version of Oracle OBIEE. Our finance ledger is the R12 instance, and we're looking to use Oracle Hyperion to use that as a calculation engine to do some of our processing of internal calculations to make processes a bit more efficient and to make things run a bit more smoothly. Additional to that, the ESR, which I'll refer to later, is the electronic staff record. So the NHS, being the largest employer in Europe, it has procured a single HR system, which is both HR and payroll functions, can enable both of those. It's actually on an Oracle-based platform, which is quite useful, given our implementation of all the other software. And that's the national product that's used to monitor and track all both posts that are established within hospitals and the individuals that are assigned to those posts, and then again to inform payroll functions. So that's all the technical side. And on to some of our reports. So what I've got here is a selection of reports that were the only thing that we were reporting on until very recently throughout the trust. And what you might notice about this slide is that there's a ton of different reports. All of them look completely different. There's no consistent format, there's no consistent style, and lots of them are very reliant on numbers and tables of numbers. This was something I was keen to investigate a bit more when I came to the trust. I started 18 months ago. I was having a look at all these different reports and wanted to have a think about how best we could progress this. So I took the opportunity to go and meet an awful lot of our budget holders, to meet a lot of the clinicians, to start asking them, do you actually find this data useful? Is this useful information? Is it things that you can use day to day? How do you find the finance function in general? How do you find how responsive we are? Are we supporting you in making the decisions that you need to make? So you can understand the resource-based implications of clinical decisions and operational decisions that are being taken. So some of the feedback that I received was the speed of response from the finance department. It wasn't as fast as people were anticipating, particularly when it got to month end. Everyone was just finding that everything ground to a halt for a couple of weeks, while a team of 80 to 100 people generating all the reports, generating all this information, were completely occupied with that and couldn't do much in terms of the business support side of things. Secondly, they were fairly surprised about how heavily reliant divisional managers and general managers were on the direct relationship they had with the finance manager for all their information. So they were again entirely reliant on asking questions, it taking a bit of a while to put reports together and then them being sent back to the general managers. So there was no direct access to information, it was all gate kept, if that's a word, by the relevant finance manager. There was no functionality to drill down or investigate, both in terms of trends or long-term analysis, and also having a look at sort of trust level and divisional level right the way down to the relevant cost centre or the relevant department that that manager was owning. There was no functionality available for that. So those were some of the themes that came out. Additionally, I wasn't convinced about the level to which these reports were actually getting used within the trust. So a lady who I greatly admire and respect was the Director of Planning and Performance at the last trust I was at before I came here. And when she started in post, she took over a team of informatics guys. There were about 40 to 50 information people that she was adopting. And from day one, she said, okay, I want you to stop sending out all your reports. And obviously the informatics guys were saying, well, we can't do that. There's very, very important operational information that's available on there, all our 18-week, all our sort of access to care targets, all our infection targets. They're all available only because of the work that we do and how much information we put out onto the intranet and widely distribute. And so she took the decision and said, look, I'll take the flak for this. You just need to turn off all information. And you might surprisingly or unsurprisingly find out that nothing really happened. So this was turned off, and within a couple of weeks, a few emails trickled in of people saying, well, hang on, where's my report on this? Where's my report on that? But actually, in the vast majority, no one really noticed. So you've got a team of 40 to 50 people churning out a ton of information, and it's just not coming back. It's just not getting used. It's just not getting built into the process by which people are making decisions in the organisation. And I got a very similar concern with the information that's being produced at the moment. Is it targeted enough? Is it easy to digest enough such that managers are really going to take it off the shelf and start using it rather than it just being something that sits in the background, occasionally referred to support a business case, but typically just sits there unnoticed. So that was my main concern. Further concern I had was a complaint by an awful lot of people that their electronic staff record information was saying one thing about their establishment and how many staff they're allowed to employ, and the finance system was saying a completely different thing. Obviously that inconsistency is not easy for a manager to work within. If you've given a specific target, you said you've got to stick to that, and yet two things are saying something different, it obviously sends conflicting messages, which is difficult to manage. So those are my concerns and the starting point. This is a slide that I've shamelessly stolen from Connecting for Health because I saw it and it resonated with me, because I'm having similar thoughts about the vision as to where I want to take the finance department versus where it currently is, as much as I can do within my role. So to the left of the slide, it's got you very much your kind of level one finance department, which is all it's doing is producing information and having a retrospective look. So it's your audit type function. It's producing reports, they get sent out and they say, last year, last quarter, we performed 20% better than our plan or 20% worse than plan. And that's useful, it ticks the box in terms of meeting statutory requirements on accounts, but is it useful to the organisation? Well, to varying degrees. So moving along into the kind of business partnering role, both to be a business partner, a strategic partner, are we supporting decisions that are being made by operational managers? Are we supporting strategic direction of the organisation by providing timely, relevant information that can really help with that? So are we regularly forecasting? Are we regularly having a forward look at what we can, where we project the organisation will be on the current path it's on? Are we really informing those decisions to where you'd absolutely want to get the finance department to, which is similar to the Michael Porter vision of value and the concept of value within healthcare. So where I'd love to be is in a position where we could fully understand patient pathways and where we could really consider the outcomes that are important to patients and clinical outcomes, and the input and the resource that we're providing to get the best outcome, to get the best bang for your buck. So how can we make sure that we are providing the right interventions and supporting patients getting better as quickly as they can, and again through use of information. So I would suggest we're quite a long way away from that final column of being a real value driver in the organisation, but that's certainly the pathway which I see and which I hope we can contribute. So within my organisation we have a system called service line reporting, which may be very familiar to a lot of you, which is the concept where we have 3 clinical boards within the trust. There's medicine, surgery and cancer, and specialist hospitals, which encompasses everything else. And below that are a series of about 30 divisions, and those divisions are all the different specialties within the organisation. So there's GI, urology, all the different specialties. They have their own division with a divisional manager, a clinical lead, and then subdivisions below that. So we manage to a contribution margin for each of those divisions. So financially we're structured that each of those divisions has a contribution that is expected to deliver each year to the organisation's bottom line, and that's how they're managed, that's how budgets are set. So in order to do that, we have a system of internal trading. So the main categories of support functions are all traded internally within the organisation. So this diagram is an overall view of how we envisaged the dashboard could be, and taking all the different components of information that we've got and providing it through one source. So you've got so these 5 are the different systems that we have that input directly into our business intelligence universe. So from the general ledger and the accounts payable, accounts receivable, and all the transactional data behind that, and all the procurement data behind that. You've got second, which is the service line reporting data. So all the traded categories, so in terms of bed days, imaging, endoscopy, pathology, all that information right the way down to the level at which it's captured within the respective systems is all built in and generated and thrown into this SLR data cube, which goes into the business intelligence universe. Below that we have workforce information, so again the ESR data, but more than that, we need to understand the temporary staffing usage. So we have a separate system, like many other hospitals in the UK that I've certainly worked out. There are a number of different systems and everything's collecting its own thing. And so we have a main for substantive staff, they all go through the electronic staff register. And then separate to that, we have a pulse, which captures all our bank and our agency usage, all our temporary staffing usage. And separate to that again, we need to capture all the recharges both into the trust and out of the trust. And for the first time, we're capturing all that information and throwing it into one area that we can have a look at. Additionally, there's pharmacy data right down to each individual prescription. At patient level, we have all that data available. And then finally, that activity and income data, because the system in the UK means that our bills are paid to us via a commissioner. So we have all our activities commissioned by a number of different clinical care groups across the country. So we have to monitor and track all that information in terms of the activity and in terms of the income associated with it. So for the first time, all this information are given similar code structure such that they can get all thrown into this one universe and then extracted in different ways, and we can interrogate the information in different ways that we've never been able to do before. So the next level down being operational decisions. So our meeting all our obligations from our commissioners in terms of access targets, infection targets. Are we tracking these things in real time to understand whether we're hitting them? Are we understanding, do we need to invest in a certain area, and how much? So if the way the commissioning model works in the UK, we can get fined if we're not hitting some of our targets. So we have an ED 4-hour emergency target where patients have to either to be treated and discharged or admitted to the hospital within 4 hours. Do we understand the resource implications of that decision? Is the fine greater than what we need to spend in order to resolve it? So that level of thinking within the organisation. To the next level down, where you've got clinical decision support tools. And the position I'd love to be in is us having data that's very readily accessible by either mobile platforms, so by an iPhone or via whatever it is that we're rolling out to our clinicians, such that we can inform their understanding of the resource implications of clinical decisions. But so particularly around prescribing drugs, is one drug costing 10 times the amount of a biosimilar drug? And do they have that information at the point which they're making that decision? With prosthetics, you can, as we all know, you can vary the cost of a prosthetic by 10, 20 times by going with different companies, all of which have relationships with specific clinicians. Therefore, do they understand how much one prosthetic is cost versus another? Similar to pathology tests, we just have never really been able to inform clinicians as to how much our pathology tests are costing. And they can cost anywhere from £2 right the way up to hundreds of pounds, but there's just no information that's been available to clinicians such that they can understand how much ordering that test or accidentally repeating that test costs the organisation. Similarly on radiology, so X-rays versus CTs versus MRI scans, how much are they costing? Certainly all the focus tends to be with junior doctors on evidence-based decision making, quite understandably in the patient's interests, but do they understand that each MRI could cost £300 per scan, and similar with CT, similar with nuclear medicine scans? So just making sure that we've got all the information available at each level in the organisation. So moving on to our new solution. So after working with our partner EvoSys for 6 to 12 months, it's felt like it's taken quite a long time, but that's mostly through the trust being able to free up sufficient resource to really invest in this product. But there are 4 main areas at the moment that we're now able to present information, and that information is via a web-based platform. It's accessible via iPad, it's accessible via the Oracle app on iPhone, and it's all accessible with appropriate security. We're currently in the first stage, we've not rolled it out trust-wide. I'll come on to a bit later where we are in the journey, but at the moment this is only accessible to the corporate teams and the corporate functions. We're taking a bit of time to pause, reflect, think about the data and really plan how we're going to have a very impactful rollout trust-wide. But the information that we've got available at the moment is, the first strand is around clinical income and activity trends. So we've had all this information available before. This is not new to the organisation. However, it's never been able to be reported through one function. Within this, there's a couple of pieces of information I've shown as a demo, both of which showing income versus plan. So just showing what the budget is, what the actual is, and what the variance is for clinical income. But the first time we're able to actually plot the trend of that, so month on month, how are we performing versus how we've planned to perform. We're able to view that at trust level, able to drill that right the way down to subspecialty level. We can have a think about whatever level is useful to group things in within the organisation. And for the first of all, responding to the challenge that I received when I first came to the trust and asking people about it, for the first time there's no longer this information being held via a gatekeeper of someone within corporate having to go away, produce a report, then come back to them. All of a sudden the manager is able to drill down on what information they'd like to see, when they'd like to see it. It's accessible whenever they want. So the first thing is all about activity trends, and we can see, you can start doing some bit more detailed analysis on, is it price or volume variance on a month on month? So is it that actually we're just seeing more and more patients, or is it that we're seeing the same volume of patients but typically the case mix is more complex, therefore we're receiving more income for the work that we're doing, the interventions that we're undertaking. Second is the financial performance trends. So still, obviously financial performance is critical to manage within the organisation, and what I tried and failed to do is to embed a video showing the slider function on here on the graph on the left. So I talked a bit before about the clinical boards, and we've got medicine board, which is shown at the moment. We've got specialist hospitals and surgery and cancer, and this is a slider function which can show you any of those moving across. Equally, you can drill down to any level within that, and it just shows absolute variance and the variance year to date, which is very useful to plot when having a look at trend analysis. The graph on the right is showing how we're performing versus a prior period, so you can map against previous months, you can map against previous quarters, but on here we're having a look at how we're performing versus how we performed a year ago, and considering things like EBITDA, how we're performing against how we've planned and how much profit we're making. We can also start thinking about mapping against some of the measures that our economic regulator called Monitor measures the hospital on. So we have two specific metrics, one about servicing the level of debt that we have and the second around liquidity. We can build in metrics that can analyse this and automatically show us how we're performing against that. And once we think a bit more about embedding forecasting, how we're projecting to perform against that, and that all should be possible to update real time. The third suite of reports available is all about indirect services. So I talked a bit previously about service line reporting and all the functions that support that. So we've currently got live drugs information via the pharmacy system, radiology information, pathology information, internally traded bed days. So some divisions and clinical boards own beds that are traded out when it gets busy. Emergency activity tends to shift up to some of the surgery beds, and we trade that internally to make sure that we're fairly attributing cost to where it should be sat. And all this is now drillable and available virtually via the web browser function. So on here I'm just showing a bit of information about radiology. So as well, we've got consultant level information, so you can have a look at which consultant is ordering which type of test, and we can benchmark consultant against consultant. So have we now got two consultants who have a similar caseload where one's ordering 3 times the number of CT scans than the other is? It's worth investigating, understanding whether that's effective use of resource. 9 times out of 10 it will be entirely clinically appropriate for that to be the case, but it's just giving managers the tools and information to investigate a bit more. And again, looking at trends over time, drilling down right the way down to subspecialty level, and just giving everyone a bit more information about how we're using radiology's time, how we're using the resource that we've got to do the volume of tests. And for the first time you can link that to the clinical activity that we've got, so you can understand what activity is driving that usage of radiology. Fourth type of report that's currently available is on our workforce information. So all this is derived directly from our electronic staff register, and it's never been accessible in a particularly user-friendly format. So currently bringing together data about vacancy, about staff turnover, about staff absence, about whether mandatory training compliance has been adhered to. Again, being the key consideration when thinking about workforce information was security in a way that wasn't really too much of a consideration until you're getting down to patient level information in all the clinical environment. It wasn't really a consideration too much around security, whereas within workforce, if you've got details of people's pay, details of any disciplinary action or anything like that, it's all available via ESRs. We had to give a lot of consideration to how we're setting things up, and that's one of the reasons why we're delaying rollout to Trustwide, to make sure we get that absolutely right, because that's obviously a key risk. But for the first time all this information is available. We have a series of red, amber, green ratings, the traffic light system we use, so we determine Trustwide what we think an appropriate level is for compliance, and can then measure ourselves by clinical board, as is shown on here, or below that, or Trustwide, how we're performing against that, so we can at an instant show whether we're compliant with our own internally set standards and anything that's externally considered appropriate. So those are the 4 areas which we're reporting on at the moment, and I'll just take on to the forward plan. I've generated here a bit of a roadmap of where I see things going with this information over the next couple of years. So the key area of work at the moment is on data integrity. So have the ability to press the button now as we have completely live information and say, okay, we'll roll it out Trustwide and set everyone up with access and passwords and all of that. The reason I'm holding off, and the reason it's held within the corporate world at the moment, is because of data integrity. And I'm fully aware that we're not going to get it 100% right before we roll out Trustwide, but I need to get it right enough such that I'm happy that credibility isn't undermined. So we rolled it out trust-wide, and this issue that we've talked about before of having one set of establishment within an electronic staff record and one establishment within the finance ledger doesn't rear its ugly head, which it is an issue at the moment. So I'm having to invest a bit of time and resource into really looking at that, unpicking it, and make sure we set up one set of processes and one team that validate and manage that on an ongoing basis, because it's absolutely critical to support managers in the organisation understand who they should have within their establishment and what level they can recruit to. So, and also ensuring that ward managers can understand the rostering system effectively, because currently there's the electronic staff record saying one thing, finance ledger saying another, and the electronic rostering system saying something slightly different. So getting all those in a line and consistent is absolutely key. So there's a piece of work around integrity, then planning for a trust-wide rollout, hoping at the end of the summer, so around September, October time, with a lot of training that needs to go alongside that. So thinking about making sure the finance managers and HR managers have appropriate support and information so they can lead this rollout, so they can be the ones that are going and sitting down, giving one-to-one training and advice to budget holders, to saying this is now the suite of information that's available, giving them the intelligence so they can drill down and really think about the decisions they need informing, and also think about adapting the reports for future usage. So one of the things that we've insisted on through this process is giving training to the finance managers so that they can generate their own reports and change the reports as they see fit. So it really is our own live product that we can tailor to the use of the organisation. After January 2016, I'm hoping to roll out wider on more mobile platforms, so thinking about again how we can inform decisions in a bit more of a real time, so really thinking about those clinical decision support tools and thinking about the operational tools and whether we can incorporate any further information that might be appropriate, such that everyone's got relevant, timely information in a format that's easy to digest, accessible via iPad, because the touchscreen devices really lend themselves to this type of data, because it's very intuitive to be selecting things, scrolling down, moving left and right, looking at trend analysis, and it's easy to interrogate on an iPad in a way that it isn't as easy to interrogate when sat in front of a desktop. So trying to have a think about and engage the organisation in what information can we get to clinicians to help inform the decisions that they're making, so they can really understand how much various things that the interventions and how they're treating patients is costing the organisation in terms of resource. The ultimate aim of this, I'm an accountant at heart, is looking to improve productivity in the organisation. So we've come out fairly well whenever we've had a look at productivity and efficiency, but I'm convinced there's a long way that we can go with this, and the ultimate aim of this investment is that it pays for itself and beyond, in that we're making real savings for the organisation that we can invest back in patient care and think about further developing our services and investing in both physical capacity and the support to that. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for giving me the time and paying attention, and I hope you found it useful and informative. And if you didn't find it useful and informative, I hope you had a nice post-lunch snooze for half an hour. So I will hand you back to John now. So thank you very much for your time.